Ave Ungro. Nygård. Mike Sanders. Ja Clarissa Vieira. And before we start with the questions and answers, there will be short presentations. And we start with you, Ave.
Hello, everybody. Some familiar faces in the audience. It's a funny situation to talk in English while the audience is mostly speaking Estonian and I speak Estonian, but we will manage. And I would like to start with personal experience or personal example. So Matt and others were speaking in the morning about how quickly is everything changing and how we have to adapt fast, how we have to react fast, how we have to be ready for those changes that are happening and very fast and very flexible, constantly on spot. I am definitely the worst person to talk about it because whenever I have to act quickly, I somehow feel like although my hands and my legs are moving quickly, my thought stops and for some reason results come out slowly. For example, when I'm taking my child to kindergarten or when I'm taking on some responsibilities. And if I have to act fast, I feel like I get very anxious. Now, in comparison, my mom, she is always well prepared. Her morning's tasks are planned already in her head in the evening. She talks it over with the family. She's always well prepared. She has all the necessary data, and for some reason she actually is fast. So in a way, it seems to me that in Estonia we have to maybe be more like my mom and less like me. So in that sense, we need all the tools there are and also think a little bit like her. And maybe the mom is our minister, I don't know, who could be the comparison here. But anyway, she or her team will need all the tools necessary and all the information necessary to be well prepared. For that, Estonian Qualifications Authority has worked already for many, many years, more than 20. And another example, if we take something that we really feel very passionate about, forest, as a metaphor. In the forest of skills-related information, we see that there are certain species of trees that are absolutely crucial. They are very good quality trees. They are reliable trees. They are very functional. They are very good for upcycling, so to speak. And those species of trees could be from Estonian Qualification Authority side, OSKA studies, and also the qualification standards issued. And what can be upcycled from those, let's call them trees? So we see that they are used for planning the training, subsidies, for educational policies, for curricular planning. And now I make an emphasis on how important is also giving guidance and going to more target groups than only educational institutions and policymakers. For that sake, Estonian Skills Compass was put in force. And in order to see what is in the newly launched Skills Compass, let's again take first a step back. So Skills Compass, like it already says in the name, in a way gives directions in this very, very big and vast data of skills. So one should need guidance in exploring it, in finding the information that is actually needed, and also create new knowledge. All this can be done with it, and it will further develop for those purposes also in the future. Just a couple of examples. If a career advisor needs a tool for their client to describe themselves, to analyze themselves, their skills, something that was also talked about in the first panel, this is a tool that can be used for that, next to others, because this is obviously not the only one. In order to find occupations and information about them, also Skills Compass is a help. And a nice new, I don't know if I can say application, gadget with it, is a recommendation for possible potential occupations to consider. So Estonian Qualification Authority has upcycled their information that comes from OSKA studies and qualification standards in itself already in the Skills Compass. A little bit of reasoning behind it. So a very important data set of Skills Compass is Estonian Skills Registry. Taxonomy, and we will talk about taxonomies later in the discussion. And this taxonomy is related to certain decisions that needed to be made some years ago, considering EURES need. But now we can do so much more with Estonian Skills Registry than just match job ads with skills for EURES sake. The database of occupations is the most integrated, the most exhaustive database of occupations in Estonia. What the future holds for Skills Compass? We are in the start, so the road will continue, we will have more development happening, and in the next phases we will see the skills profiles and skills assessment taken into focus. Assessment is a topic that also will be discussed upon tomorrow, so do not miss it. And let's see if we can create Estonian own skills anticipation full-on system, and definitely we will extensively use AI for that. So approach our team later, see what it is about, try it out, let us know.
Okay, thank you, Ave. So indeed, this Skills Compass, it's also present here in this conference. After this panel session, when you go out to the right, then there is some screens and also people helping you to understand how to use this Skills Compass. But now we will continue with you, Peter, and you will introduce not just how things work in Estonia, but how they work in somewhere else.
Somewhere else, being Sweden, yes. Thank you. Yes, good afternoon. I work as an occupational analyst with the Swedish Public Employment Service. And I like to, excuse my language, get shit done, as they say. So I'm a very practical person, so this is going to be not as theoretical, but a bit, but more practical. So we have a taxonomy, a classification for the labor market, for the Swedish labor market. Good to remember. And this is a common terminology or vocabulary for all actors of the labor market, right? So we want to be encompassing of the whole labor market. And who are these actors on the labor market? Well, we have job seekers, employers, transition organizations, education providers, private companies, career development, probably more. All these actors use our taxonomy as a source of information for various purposes. Job seekers, they use it for registering an occupation with the Public Employment Service, for example. And so this taxonomy then, as a common language between actors, facilitates then matching, career advice, guidance, upskilling, statistical analysis, so on. So what's in it? Skills, we heard about that. Of course, there are skills. Occupations, terms for education, like degrees, certificates, diplomas. Forecasts, we have geography concepts. It's relevant for when you want to perhaps move to a different part of the country. You want to link your occupation with a certain geographical region and so on. So all these like relevant concepts for the labor market. We'll try to condense them and make them also linkable as URIs, Uniform Resource Identifier. I think Clarissa will touch upon it briefly. Yeah. So this means that it's interoperable, so you can link to each of the terms that we have in the taxonomy between various PES services, or if you're in a private company who wants to use the data, you can link directly into each term that we use. And we try to add more terms and types and collections continuously. So how good is our taxonomy? Then I say ideally within brackets. So this is how we want to work. We want to have the best possible information, right? So how do we decide what's the best possible information? Well, it's not entirely up to us, of course, but we think we kind of start from the beginning, like saying, if we get the best quality data, we can build the best quality services with this data. So, for example, an employer organization, they know a lot about the occupations that they are representing. So we talk to them, like, what do you think? What should the name of this occupation be, and what skills should be included with this occupation? So we go directly to what we believe is the best source of information, to the experts. So we have, for example, training providers, statistics, laws and regulations, of course, matter. Government agencies. An example there is, so we look at the air traffic controller occupation. It's a highly regulated occupation, so it's only, we have one government agency who is responsible. So we talk to them, say, what should we do about this? What's the name of this occupation? What are the skills acquired or relevant for this occupation? So all the information, ideally, is quality assured by human experts. And so, yeah, we can streamline the job search process for all types of jobs on the entire labor market. Sorry to reiterate, but it's important that we don't focus only on the data available, for example, through online job vacancies. So we want to find all of the information about the labor market. Some of this information is, I wouldn't say hidden, but it's not readily accessible. For example, like trade unions have a lot of information, but they're not very keen on releasing that open. So we have to have a relationship with these experts in order to be able to provide the best information. We can update rather quickly, so we rely a lot on user feedback. Again, URIs, and it's all open source, so it's free for everyone to use. And looking at the future, our way of working requires a lot of maintenance. Right? It's very human-driven, it's very expert-driven. We do use AI, but we have decided that the final decision is going to be made by a human expert on all of the terms that we include in the taxonomy. So this requires funding, it requires resources. And so the challenge from here on out is funding, of course, but also that we describe the labor market. We want to reflect what the labor market is, describe it, and we will most likely always be one step behind. But we choose that this is right, considering that we strive to have the best possible information out there. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Clarissa, so you will give us an even broader view.
Yes, I will. Yes, good afternoon. I work for ESCO, which is the European Commission's taxonomy for the labor market. And what I will do is use ESCO as an excuse to give you an introduction of what the taxonomy for the labor market is. And afterwards, I'll speak a little bit about the use cases. So there you go. So you're already aware that taxonomies exist. You already use them because you use them in e-commerce websites. So for example, if you buy something in Amazon, you will see a general list of products. And then as you expand those products, you will have more granular groupings of products. That's a taxonomy. Those are hierarchically related concepts, organized. And ESCO does this only for the labor market. And here you can see the two pillars, the skills. And in skills, we include knowledge concepts. We include transversal soft skills, language skills and knowledge and skills. And then you have the occupations. And as you can see, on the left side, you have a column with general groupings of occupations and general groupings of skills, knowledge, etc. So how does the hierarchy work? So for the occupations pillar, we start with ISCO. So we are reusing the ISCO taxonomy, and that's something which is very common when building taxonomies, is that we try to reuse existing resources instead of starting from scratch because of interoperability issues. And one thing to take into account is that taxonomies are expensive and difficult to build, so it's a good thing if we learn from each other and if we work together. So we start with ISCO, and you see it starts on number 6, the orange box. You start with more general, and then it goes down. So you have animal producers, livestock and dairy producers, which is more granular than animal producers, and then you have shepherd, which is more granular than livestock and dairy producers. So it's from general to granular, and then the same thing for skills. So you start with information skills, which is the more general, and then processing information is more granular, and then processing data, transcribing dialogues, those are more granular things. And one very interesting thing about this is that partially, this is how we think. So for example, when we look at a chair is a furniture, dog is a mammal. This is not the only way we think, it's a lot more complex than this. We have lots of cognitive processes for flying around, interacting with each other, but this is one way how we think, so this is familiar to us. And then in taxonomies, you usually have more metadata, so it's not just about hierarchical organization of concepts, but you have also definitions, because this is about meaning. We are managing information. Information is different from data because information has a narrative, it has context, it's structured. So you have a name, paleontologist. You have the hierarchy, so it's under geologist. You have the definition. You have synonyms, which here we are calling alternative labels. Any notes on regulatory aspects of the occupation. And then you have what skills and knowledge are essential or optional for this occupation. So here below you can see some examples of essential skills, such as promoting the transfer of knowledge. But then if you go to the ESCO portal, you can see also optional skills, essential knowledge, and optional knowledge. And then if you go to the skill example, apply for research funding, once again, you will see the place in the hierarchy, you will see the definition, synonyms. Skill reusability level, this is information on whether this skill is relevant for all industries, some industries, or just one occupation. So apply for research funding. We are saying here it's cross-sector, so it's several industries work. This is something which is useful for several industries, and this is actually quite connected with what Matt was saying this morning about the fact that some skills are just for technical skills and just for one occupation, and then the broader a skill is, the more transferable it is. How can you access ESCO? So you have several options. You can just Google ESCO taxonomy, and then you will go to the portal, and then you'll be able to expand. So I've already shown you this screenshot, so this is what you will see in the portal, and then you'll be able to manually browse the taxonomy, or you can download it, and for that you just download ESCO on Google, and it will take you to the portal, and you will choose the version, because we have several versions. Then in content you choose classification, you choose the language, and that will give you a CSV file with not only the taxonomy, but more information. So for example, lists of digital skills or lists of green skills. All of this will be in separate CSV files. ESCO is created for the European labor market. That's different from a country labor market, so it's different from Compass. Why? I don't know much about Estonia's industry, but I can tell you about my country, Portugal. We have a large cork and marble industry. If we start adding a large quantity of concepts for cork and marble, this is going to be very granular for all the countries that do not have neither cork or marble, so it's not useful for them. So that's why I try to keep a general description of what's going on in the labor market at an European level, and then if you want information about what's happening at a more regional level or national level, you can go to a national taxonomy. ESCO is translated in 28 languages, and this allows us to have a data-driven approach on how we collect information for all countries within Europe. So this means that we are analyzing millions of job vacancies and CVs in different languages, and that will give us a always up-to-date perspective on the labor market. And this morning, Matt was speaking about how quickly skills landscape can change from one moment to the other. Because ESCO has this data-driven approach, this means that it's always up-to-date. And that's why, even though it's a taxonomy only for the European Union, it's used all over in the world, as you can see. Use cases. I'm not going to dwell on skills intelligence because your entire morning has already been an analysis of different types of analysis that you can do with statistical analysis of skills, so you already know what this is. E-profiles and CVs, this is Europass. So if you're familiar with Europass, this is a platform from the European Commission where you can create your CVs online and then you can add the skills that you have. LinkedIn also has this, so you can they suggest skills that you have and then you add to your profile. So they use ESCO to suggest new skills. Job matching, so for example, if you have a job vacancy looking for a mechanical engineer, and then you have a CV that is looking for, uses a synonym of mechanical engineer, or instead of saying exactly mechanical engineer, they can use mechanical engineering, it's able to do the match. Because of the synonyms and because both are tagged together. And even if it's in different languages, for example, in the EURES portal, you can have a CV in Spanish and a job vacancy in Italian, and it's able to recognize that it's about that job vacancy is looking for that CV. So that encourages mobility across countries. Qualifications, so for example, if an organization wants to upskill their employees and look for relevant qualifications, they can use ESCO for that. I'm not going to dwell on this because I'm sure we'll be focusing more on this during the discussion panel. Curricular development, if a student wants to study an area of IT, for example, and he doesn't know what he wants to study, if he browses ESCO or another labor market taxonomy, he'll be able to see, okay, you have ICT project management, you have data science, you have cybersecurity, all these things that I can study, and then what you can see, okay, with these skills I can do this occupation, so this can be a tool to help students decide their future. Social justice and integration, this is just a general umbrella term for making the world a better place. So for example, we have projects that are trying to connect people from African countries that live in isolated communities and connect them with jobs in the city. You have people using ESCO to try make the workplace more welcoming for people with disabilities, etc. I'm sure we will dwell on this as well. green and digital transition, so skills are more and more important, and this means that people will need a new set of skills. If there's a change in the industry, or for example in the manufacturing or agricultural industry, if there's a change, it means that people need to learn new skills. This is something that Matt was talking about as well. So yes, green and digital transition, because we have concepts labeled as either being green or digital, this is something that helps. And regional development, I'm not going to dwell on this as well, because Matt was already saying, but if a country wants to invest in a specific sector, they want to have skills intelligence about this sector, and then they can invest in qualifications. Thank you very much.
Now, thanks to Clarissa, we were able to zoom out. But now, when we are flying, we will zoom in again. And now we are in US. And Mike, the floor is yours.
It's been a long day, hasn't it? You know, we're 4 hours in, you just had lunch, and now you got to listen to me talk. I feel bad for you. I'm here, flew 13 hours from the US to talk about a project we at George Washington University called LASER. Now, LASER is not a taxonomy. You heard from 3 taxonomists here behind me. They're great, they know what they're doing. We're data scientists. What we do is we take the information that comes out of taxonomies and try and make it work with the data we find throughout the economy, throughout education, throughout workforce. So what LASER does is says, okay, why don't we try and find some interoperability, some commonalities amongst all this data, and see if we can use it to produce insight. The first thing that I asked when I landed here in Estonia, I asked all my colleagues here in the room, how do you define a skill? There's a practical reason I asked this question, because I have never gotten the same answer twice. I have asked rooms of people, much like you, across the US and virtually across Europe, Australia, and basically the entire English-speaking world. And the definition I get back is almost exclusively different every time I get an answer. So let me level set with you. Starting right now, I want to define skills as a combination of knowledge to complete a task. That is my definition, and there's words on the screen that you can see. I'm pointing to my screen, there's one behind me too. That's how I define skills. That's how the data scientist in me says I have to define skills. And that is a different definition from every single taxonomy that's behind me, and pretty much every taxonomy you find in the world. Why? Because we need the data to actually do analysis, to do our data science. You heard from Matt this morning doing the exact same type of concept, trying to take this data, to analyze it, to give you results, to do policy. But even he uses a different definition of skills than we do. So now I've taken half my time to tell a joke and level set with you. Let me tell you about what we're actually working on. We believe that skills develop in a way that's very similar to the educational development concept. Essentially, you start with a little bit of knowledge. You learn how to take that knowledge and make it operable into completing a task. So it's a cycle. And when you get to that task, you realize that you can't complete all of the tasks you might want to do, so you need more knowledge. And it just spirals, literally like a spring straight up. At least we hope it's always straight up. Sometimes, not so much. We can take this information and provide insight beyond it. We can talk about supply and demand. So we can talk about knowledge as supply, your teachers, your education providers. You convey knowledge to students. These students use that knowledge to go perform a task, to go do a job, to make money. That performance is what they're rewarded with money, right? In between, there's a linkage. There's a skill concept that has to be developed. And we as teachers, as educators, think that we're helping individuals develop that skill. But in reality, we are providing knowledge, and the individual has to develop the skill themselves. That's why skills are so hard to define, because we don't have a discrete way of saying that this is a skill. All we have is a skill concept. And every skill is unique to the person. So everyone in this room, when I asked that first question, what is a skill? You had a definition in your head, and I guarantee you it's not identical to anyone else, even if the words are the same. So why am I here in a panel of taxonomists? The reason is we understand that skills, through all the definitions that we have in taxonomies, are different, but they have a core bit of truth. And that core bit of truth we can actually utilize to better represent what human skills are across a variety of use cases. So this picture here behind me and in front of me talks about how we look at taxonomies as not flat, but different layers in an ontology. An ontology being a combination of flat taxonomies where the linkages are also important. It's written on the next slide, I promise. The numbers you see on the slide are actually the American viewpoint of skills. We have 4 major taxonomies we work with. Don't ask me to name them, it's a lot of alphabet soup. There's around 14 major taxonomies globally. ESCO in particular is a big one. The Estonian one will be a big one, and all the rest of the ones we'll talk about throughout the next, day and a half or so are also important. But they're all different, and there's thousands of skills within them. We take all this skill information and build ontologies. Ontologies are the relationships between those taxonomies. It's the data you need to show the linkages together. And I'm out of time, so I'm going fast. This is a 20-minute presentation done in 5, so bear with me. This is how the data scientist looks at ontologies, and you'll get a copy of these slides and you can read it later. But the key insight is that we can take these relationship maps and use them through AI to extract skills information. Not a skill, not a data point, but a relational piece of information. It's a skill relative to this other skill, relative to this other skill, because no 2 skills are alike, right? So what Laser does is it extracts all this information and puts it on a map. We fit it, and then we call this mapping, but it's kind of a redundancy because that fitting puts it onto the map and makes it understandable. And as you can tell, I did not expect this slide in this deck. I expected this slide. So you saw something like this morning from Matt. What you don't realize is this is actual data that came from a job applicant and a job. So think of it as the red dots are actually the job application request. So I go and say, I want to hire someone. Here's the skills you need. The green dots and the blue dots represent, respectively, the work experience and the education that an applicant puts in. What we've done is we've mapped all the skills we're able to extract from that using our ontology of taxonomies and said, here's how they relate to each other. Here's how they relate in skills. Here's how they relate in knowledge. And here's how they relate in levels. Levels being how deep is your skill. And we can actually do data science and math and apply logic and go, here's the centroids. Here's where these clusters exist. And I can measure the distance between them and say, here's where these skills overlap. Now you can go, man, this is a cool graphic. I don't think it is because I made it, but the graphic is showing you what can be done with this type of information. And the reason this works is we've ingested literally millions of examples and tagged them with all these taxonomies and the relationships between them and said, here's where we think skills exist and here's how they relate to each other. So tomorrow, not me, not you, not even your kids, can take this information and go, here's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So when you wake up tomorrow, you now have this knowledge to understand that we can work with skills. We can make skills work with us. But all that's missing is a lot of data and a little bit of AI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. So, and I will remind you that if you want to ask questions, then this Slido is available and you can ask your question here. And I'm very happy to see already that some of you have already asked some questions. But yeah, feel free to ask the questions. But now, listening your presentations, I'm a little bit worried because when we are talking about skills, then although the words are quite concrete, describing the skills, but as we understand that the meaning behind the skill is not so concrete. It's like all over the place, or at least around these words. And they are overlapping a lot. So And should we, because it seems like a mission impossible to put them into this taxonomy and make some structure out of it. So should we still do it, or just say that, never mind, let's go on with our lives? So should we systemize the skills? And if we do it, then what is the best way to do it? Let's start here with Ave.
In the movie, although the mission is possible, Tom Cruise always does it. So in a way, we are obliged to also deal with what sociology calls wicked problems, or we have the mission, the task to deal with it, because there is absolutely no other possibility. So it's true, skills are ambiguous, very often concrete language-based, and very often concrete culture-based, context-based concepts. And it is very apt to use the word ontology when we talk about actually how we think. And we don't think very concretely often. We don't define often our thoughts or concepts that are in our heads. We don't systemize clearly in our head, and that is exactly how it goes with the skills. But then again, why we need to still go and systemize it is, to give an example, it was a beautiful summer in Estonia, and when you are in a flower field, you just pass with a car and you are in a flower field, you see the field, and you have to see the field. And then you go to concrete level, or you start from the concrete level, which is the concrete flower. You see the features very nicely. You see what are the main features of the flower. But in order to see the relations, the ecosystem, you have to take a wider perspective. You have to see the bigger picture.
Mike, what do you say about it? Because you are a data scientist.
So I say thank you for all the people who are out there creating taxonomies for me to work with.
So I know that
not to be flippant.
You need to say that we need some kind of system, otherwise you are out of job.
I mean, data science is taking the known and applying it to the unknown. And having the experts go in and really define what they think skills are, put that classification information together, provides the type of insight that we need to actually operationalize the data that we're working with. That said, I believe that underlying all these skills definitions that we already have, there's some skill concept that is the truth. But as we start to apply language to it, as we start to categorize it, it becomes a viewpoint. So every taxonomy is a set of viewpoints that work very well in their context. But when we start trying to take a very broad context, not to call you out, it gets harder and harder because we all have different understandings of what skills are. So I think it is a very, very hard problem. It's mission impossible to really create a perfect taxonomy for everyone. But I think it's very doable to create relatively focused taxonomies in such a way that we can actually utilize them. So an Estonian taxonomy works really well in Estonia, but I'm not sure I'd use it in the US.
But what about Sweden? So are you happy what you have, or you see that it's not working at all?
Well, it works, hopefully. No, but that's why I said ideally, I think in my presentation, our ambition is high, and I think for that, yes, the skill concept is ambiguous, but we have a clear purpose, right? These are terms that we want to use for services for example, job seekers. In that case, the use case is very clear. And so that's the easy part, right? We can find the best information and put it together and let it out there, and hopefully it helps a job seeker. That's easy. But expanding beyond that, that's difficult. So that's why like Mike said, the natural context of the labor markets is forgiving, you could say, when you work with large quantities of data, or in our case, quite small quantities.
Clarissa, you see the wide picture in the EU level. So from EU level, so how are you managing it with it? And is it really, is it mission impossible, or based on the work that you have done already, it's still mission possible, but quite complicated mission?
So creating a taxonomy for something abstract like skills and knowledge is a lot more difficult than creating a taxonomy for objects, right? So once again, if we take the product taxonomy example, you can describe a chair. A chair is made out of X material, and it has a function for us to sit down. And then a garden chair is different from a living room chair. That's already difficult, huh? I remember when I was working in the product taxonomy space, defining what a toothbrush was difficult. Because some toothbrushes are electrical, and the others are just made from plastic or bamboo, and they are two completely different objects. But they are still the same object. If it's this difficult to create a taxonomy for objects that we can see and feel and touch, imagine for skills and knowledge, because a labor market taxonomy looks at all areas of commercial and non-commercial activities, all areas of knowledge, how this relate with the wide variety of use cases, because these are not for one use case. This is for many different use cases at the same time. It's very difficult. At the same time, we are dwarfs in the shoulders of giants, because trying to understand what knowledge is, trying to understand the difference between knowledge and skill, what are different types of skills, this has been a topic of conversation since the beginning of philosophy. Aristotle already wrote, and Plato already wrote, about the difference between knowledge and skills. And a lot of the design principles and theory behind ontologies and taxonomies are based in linguistics and philosophy. So we already have millennia worth of theory and people trying to systemize how human beings think about realities. On a more practical level, for knowledge areas, you have qualifications, different types of qualifications. So what you have to do is analyze what is it that we are classifying. We are classifying vocational training, things that children study in primary school, things that people need to learn or upskill when working in companies. So we look at qualifications and we categorize them. We look at job vacancies that have skills mentioned. So we have data that we can take, and then we create an abstract representation of that reality.
Very good. I liked your examples of this chair and toothbrush, that the physical objects that we can see and touch, and even with these, we face these kind of problems. And now I have questions to Mike, because you're a data scientist and you like systems. And now, when we talk about the skills, should they be categorized hierarchically, or it's like a web or a net or some other system? So what kind of system is there?
You know, this is a question that we struggled with very early in our process, because we started with an idea of a taxonomy of taxonomies, which is just a stack. And stacks are great insofar as they're easy to work with, but they don't really represent the relationships that you need. So we moved to a web. So web being, look at all the interconnections between individual nodes. And that's more the ontology approach. But as I stated earlier, I think the underlying concepts of skills are more amorphous than what a web allows for. So think of it more like, and this is my physics background. I was a physicist before I was a data scientist. Think of it more like the ether. The underlying truth exists out there, and all we perceive is what penetrates into our reality and skills. So by you looking at a skill and observing it, you give it form. Your form is different from everyone else's, so even the web concept is insufficient. But we have to start somewhere, and in the data science world, it may not be a true label that we put on things. It might just be the relationship map that we have, the system solution. And the best label is the skill that is closest to the center. And to answer your question, I don't think there is a good prototype to really talk about skills relationships because really we don't really understand them. I mean, I had to start my presentation with defining a skill just so I could even put it into a data sequence. And that's just my opinion. So I guarantee you we'll hear presentations later today and tomorrow that will do it a different way. So I guess the answer is there's no single best way to represent it, except for the one that you're comfortable with and you can apply to what you need to use it for.
Yeah. So basically, what I would like to say after hearing your answer is that we can use different systems. And one system is not better than the other one. One system is useful here, another one is useful there, and so on. But who benefits from creating these systems? Question to you, Ave and Peter.
That's one of the most essential questions. So whatever we create, it has to be functional. It has to be operable.
So who is the customer?
Yeah.
Let's say, are our audience your customer, or the employers or employees? So who is your customer?
For example, in Skills Compass, when we try to think about the first development phase, our main target group in our head was career advisor. So you have to think about a certain user, not only think, you have to talk to the user and you have to ask them, what do they actually need? What is happening? What is needed? What is missing currently? So when we, for example, career advisors of Estonian Unemployment Insurance Fund were also the first people who got the preview of Skills Compass. And later days, they wrote in the Teams chat very many messages like, okay, this is exactly what I waited for. Okay, now I have to try it out because I really need it. And then I was so happy because I'm not so maybe worried whether we get the skills definition right in the process, but whether it's actually functional.
It's like defining beauty. If it's hard to define it, but if you see it, you really understand that. So this is beautiful, or there is beauty in this process, or in this object, or in this person. So yeah. So I'm happy that it's that there are people in Estonia who finds it really useful. So Peter, can you share the same kind of feeling from Sweden?
Well, again, it's about the purpose, I think. So, I mean, like I said in my presentation, we have the users of the information are. It's quite practical. It's like it's for job matching. It's one of the foremost uses. Okay, so, but I think the difficulty is trying to measure the efficiency of it. So we would ideally like to design an experiment saying, like, if you, how much does it cost the society that a person who applied for a job didn't get the job or did not apply for a job even though they were qualified because they weren't using the same words as the employers, right? When describing the job or referring to the actual open position. So I'm quite hesitant to how often that happens, but it could happen. As I do a lot of occupation analysis, and for example, a lot of the manufacturing industries in Sweden, they use one title for most manufacturing professions, and that's operator, regardless of what they're manufacturing, right? So that is something that our taxonomy can help with describing, that there are differences between these occupations, for example. Yeah.
Okay.
So ideally, the society could benefit from lower costs to unemployment service.
So basically, thanks of this systemizing the skills and occupations, we will be more effective as a society. And so accomplishing our goals more easily.
Hopefully, yes. No.
Now, a quite practical question to Mike. Are the laser outcomes publicly available?
So the downfall of a 5-minute presentation is I don't get to tell you all the fun things about laser. But laser is an open source product. We are launching here in the fall, the library in Python. So if you're a coder and want to go play with it, it'll be available to you in the next few weeks. That said, a lot of the data that goes into this is also open source data from the US right now. We ingest from a public-private partnership called the National Labor Exchange and a open source data set called Open Syllabus. That's education and workforce data to create the maps. The 3D model I showed you was actually a map for a regional DC area, so a geographic map. Those maps will become available later next year, hopefully, for most of the larger US population centers. We're working with partners, hopefully including Estonia, to build similar concept maps for different areas so that you can do things like take a document, ingest, and get those maps built so you can do relational mathematics, like here's a job applicant, here's the job, do they fit? Generally speaking, though, the results of any individual data set can't be made public because of agreements with the source data. But because the underlying software is open source, you can take any data you have and get the same insights from it that we do from the large training data sets.
Very good. And now the question to all of you from the audience. What are your thoughts about stopping type-based categorization and replace it with criteria-based? And if you start answering, how do you understand the question at all? Because there are lots of things that maybe mean different things in your head and in the head of the person who asked this question. So, but yeah, what are your thoughts about stopping type-based categorization and replace it with criteria-based? So let's start, Clarissa, maybe with you.
Type-based categorization, I'm not sure what that means. So the categorization that we are aiming at, I'm not sure if this replies the question, but we are, in ESCO, we are trying to shift into a categorization that is an objective representation of reality as opposed to being use case-led. So when ESCO was first built, it had two main use cases in mind, job matching and mapping to qualifications. These two options that you're giving me also sound to me like they would be use case-led. So for this use case, or for this context, I'm adopting this approach to categorizing or making machine readable what the labor market is. What we are seeing in ESCO is because technology is advancing so fast. The ESCO was created 10 years ago. Just imagine how much artificial intelligence developed. Our users have changed so much and increased. And it's proven that the best way to categorize any domain is via an objective representation of reality. And it's proven because we do have classification systems, like, for example, the gene ontology, that were created decades ago. And despite all the technological changes and despite all the use cases that it has, it remains relevant. So it's proven, historically, that if you categorize according to an objective representation of reality, the taxonomy will remain relevant for the long term and for all use cases.
Mike, what do you think about it?
So I'm a bit biased coming from physics, and astrophysics in particular, because type-based and classification-based systems are often used for celestial objects like stars. So a type-based would be looking at certain ranges, and if the key variables you're looking at fall in that range, that's the typing. Whereas a classification type system would be looking at specific differences. E.g., it operates only in the color spectrum, so it's this set. and therefore its size is this big, it's this set. So you actually follow a decision tree type classification. There's been arguments over those types of differences for things like taxonomization and trying to create unique identifiers forever, especially in biology. Darwin came in hundreds of years after that debate started, just to give you some context. And I think here when we talk about skills, unlike physical objects that you're typing or trying to categorize, it's really difficult to actually say one or the other is going to actually be better, because there are situations where one works better than the other. A decision tree type classification system works really well when you have unique features, whereas a more type-based classification system works when you have very ambiguous features. But both situations occur in skills, in workforce, in education. So again, I hate to be that guy, but I think choose the one that works in your context and you won't be wrong, because I don't see a true correct answer and we don't need one.
So it's like this street fighting. Whatever you do, if it works, do it. There is no right and wrong answer.
Throw sand in someone's eyes if you got it, right?
But now, Ave, a question to you that when we're talking about skills, there are definitely some kind of learning path behind it. So, and when we are describing these skills, should there be some kind of connection between skills and learning outcomes?
Can I also answer to the previous one?
Yes, you can.
Because I really thought about it. It's a good question, very good question. And if I understand correctly what the person meant, we actually are already criteria-based. Actually, we are not doing it only type-based, not exactly like, for example, Linné, I did it. So in that sense, we are already leaning towards the certain criteria that come from the functional perspectives, from the contextual perspectives, from the methodological perspectives. So we see those criteria there, and we do not only describe the features as such, if I now understood correctly. So, and in the future, maybe we will talk more about the future later, but I think that we, like when I imagine a situation where, for example, there is a recruiter or HR specialist that needs very specific skill set taxonomy for a very specific reason, ideally, it should just come like that, and it definitely will be criteria-based. So in that sense, this is where we're heading at. So
this skills compass, Oskuste compass, which one is it? Which kind of system is this?
Right now, I would say still a combination, but definitely criteria is part of the algorithm. And yeah, answering to your next one.
To the next question, yeah. Skills and learning outcomes, should they be connected, or should there be connection? Because then somebody needs to say that what kind of learning outcomes are related to this skill.
I would say they must be. To a certain extent, they must be, because one of the main reasons why we do this job is that actually the skills would be taught. So obviously there must be a relation. How it happens, that is already a more complex question.
Okay. So basically you shift the responsibility towards the educators.
No, not in the sense that I say that there must be a relation. I didn't say that the educators must do the relation. So this has to be a close cooperation. For example, in Estonian Qualifications Authority, the collaboration is already done when the qualification standards are issued, and where on the table you have all the world's united. So you have educational world, you have employers, you have the policymakers there sitting. The debates can be quite harsh, it can go wild, and yet some sort of a result has to come out of it.
Peter, your thoughts about this, these two questions?
Well, on learning outcomes and skills, I'd rather answer that actually. Yes, they should be linked. How? Depending on the situation, of course. I'm very biased towards the data quality first aspect. So it will be similar to, as we work with any term, I would say, I would rely on expert user input when linking learning outcomes and skills. We did do this actually in Sweden at the Swedish PES. We looked specifically at labor market training programs, so for very unskilled job seekers. And so we looked at each module of these programs and extracted and found like bits of text that we could map to a skill. This resulted actually in quite a few, we needed to add quite a few new skills to our taxonomy. So there is of course knowledge in the learning outcomes. We're talking about knowledge as a part of a skill, and knowledge of course is distributed through training or as a learning outcome. So yes, they're the same in some sense, so they should be linked.
Okay. Now let's talk about money. So we are using public money here, building these taxonomies, putting all this data into the systems. This is lots of work, and somebody needs to pay for this. And if we don't use it, finally, the outcome, then the money is wasted. So whose responsibility is to take these taxonomies into use? Is it scientists? Is it Kutsekoja? Or is it Mike personally? Or does it come from EU level? So Clarissa, are you responsible for this? So who is responsible? Let's start with you, Clarissa.
I mean, it's not so much, for me, responsibility, it's not, I have trouble connecting with that word. So people find it useful. You cannot, it's very difficult to create statistics without a classification system. And this morning, you saw the important role that skills intelligence has on the labor market, especially with the coming of AI. And the truth is that people seem to want to use taxonomies for the labor market. So for example, you have local governments who want to invest, for example, in a specific sector, for example, the automotive sector. And they want to know, okay, what are all the skills and knowledge associated with the sector? If they want to make it in a way which is sustainable, then we'll want to know which ones are digital. And then they want to have intelligence on whether they have this knowledge and skills in their area, if they need to create qualifications, etc., for example. Or another example could be upskilling. So companies come to us and say, please give us, so we work in, this is a true story, this is one of the latest examples. We work in the energy sector, and we want a list of all the green skills for the types of energy that we produce. And if, for example, imagine that they want to upskill their employees on renewable energies in general. They want to find all qualifications for renewable energies. Now imagine that the qualification is tagged with solar energy. If these two concepts are not hierarchically connected, it's not going to be a match. They look for renewable energies, and qualifications about geothermal, solar, wind energy won't come up because there are no hierarchical relationship. So these hierarchical relationships between concepts are filling use cases like the two that I gave, for example, and more. So for example, for career development, if someone loses their job, and I showed you in ESCO you have occupations with several skills and knowledge that you have. it's quite user-friendly. You go to that page, you search for your occupation, you see, okay, which skills and knowledge do I have? Because often people are not even aware of what they know. They can use that to help fill in their CV, and then they can click on those skills and knowledge. Oh, I can also do these other occupations. And then they get this idea, okay, this other occupation also exists, but I do not have this skill and knowledge, which is listed here. So now they know that they want to study. So I think that for me the issue is not, will anybody want to use it? For me the challenge is, how can one classification system be the answer to so many completely different needs?
Okay, very good examples and very good answer. What I was thinking when listening your answer is that maybe this skills system is like public roads. Somebody is responsible of building these roads, but taking use of these roads are not like the responsibility of those people who build it, but those who want to benefit it. Like you mentioned, there are employers who want to expand, for example, their factories or to get new employees. They are responsible of using this system. You just provide the public resource to do it.
Yeah.
Mike, your thoughts about it?
I very much agree with your public goods type argument. At the end of the day, being able to classify and put context around skills information is highly important for users and stakeholders across the gamut. We talk with education tech companies, we talk with governments, we talk with schools, employers, I've talked with military contractors, just across the gamut, who go, if we can really classify these skills and link them together, we can do great things. Now, where I dispute you is you said if this taxonomy or the skills classification isn't used, it's a waste. Mm-hmm. I don't agree. One of the things you do in academia is you try and you fail. And finding ways to fail uniquely, especially, is a type of learning that we don't do enough, at least in the US. I don't know how it is in the EU. But generally what happens is if we build something, it doesn't have immediate value, we throw it away. But as a data scientist, I go, well, these taxonomies built 40 years ago, like ONET. ONET is the American skills taxonomy built in the 80s that virtually everyone derides. But it produced a lot of learning and is now coming back into importance in ontological work and understanding some of the foundational pieces that while it did get used initially, it's kind of withered on the vine, but its value has become apparent later. So I don't think necessarily doing a classification and saying it's a failure because it doesn't get used immediately is true. So my argument is therefore, classifications are good, we should keep doing them and not be afraid to fail in that process.
So we didn't fail, we learned something.
Exactly.
Peter.
Yeah.
Sweden.
This is a question that's dear to me because I work for the government, so it should be funded. Anyway, I think I think the state has a role to play in providing open, unbiased data as well. So I think we find that there is a lot of good data for qualifications, for occupations, so on, but it's locked in with either with private companies or private companies working for example, trade unions, right? Doing their taxonomies, but now it's their data and it's not open to the public good. So there, I think the government, the state, has an important role to play to keep providing open and unbiased data.
Ave, I already have another question for you, but you can answer this question as well.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of joint responsibility and collaboration. So everybody here knows Hagi Shane. There was a TV show yesterday about his life and his contribution, and I just deeply admired what he said in one of his speeches, that to journalists of Estonian public broadcasting, that whatever you do, remember that your main purpose is to serve. And in that sense, I think in public services and as public servants, we have to constantly remind ourselves that this is our main mission, to serve. And that means that we have to always be alert about the needs of the society. We have to react to them. We have to collaborate, and we have to be very apt to change. And I also keep reminding myself, my darling husband's grandfather, who does everything with hammer and saw, like everything, and they are the manual ones, and so he does it pretty well. But whose responsibility is that he should take also some other machinery? Is it mine? Is it his? So you see that it's also a complex question.
So until he's happy, maybe
he doesn't
happy. Need new tools.
He's very happy. He's only not happy when he doesn't have the hammer and saw next to him.
Okay, yeah, serving others or serving to society. So thanks to you, the rest of the society can shine. I would put it this way. But now let's look into the future. And when we are talking about the future, we cannot talk about the future not mentioning AI. And so what does the future hold for us? So how the classifications, how these taxonomies, how understanding what the skills mean and how occupations are described, how it changes in the future. What do you see? So, Clarissa.
So I do have some slides for that. Is it possible to access them? Or
let's see. If the slides appear, then...
It's the second part of my presentation after the thank you. Because speaking about the future without images will not be very user-friendly. Is this possible?
So let's see. Do the slides come on screen or not? Let's wait. But
yeah, I'll go next.
Yeah, and then others can answer. So Ave, I prepared this question for you. So how do you see the future in Estonia?
Estonia cannot function independently from the rest of Europe and the bigger context. So there are certain aspects that will be proper to Estonia. There will be some things that we cannot do anything about and they come from the world. So just to give an example from Oskuste perspective, we have anticipated certain things and then, COVID came. So, these types of things you might know that they will happen at a certain point, but when exactly, you don't. I also remember the moment when we had on Oskuste stage a representative of Finnish language, basically language-based and generative language models-based AI expert. And he predicted that in more or less 10 years, we will be talking more about generative language models and technology. And it only passed like 2 or 3 years, and we are only talking about that. So you never know when exactly certain processes happen. In Estonia, we should be taking really seriously the aspect of competitiveness. So Estonia should, in next years, be more competitive in global market, and we have to do everything possible so that it happens, because it is actually the taxpayers' money that actually puts our economy in force. And the other aspect is happiness. I think Estonians should be more happy.
So now we are ready for the ESCO view for the future.
Thank you. Yes, speaking a bit about taxonomies and ontologies without images is difficult, so I think this will be more user-friendly.
I would like to say that very well prepared.
All right, so what's the difference between a taxonomy and ontology? In a domain ontology, so describing a particular domain, in this case the labor market, is Taxonomies only have hierarchical relationships. Ontology, actually I'll stand up so that I can see better what's in the slide. Ontologies have these kind of horizontal relationships, non-technical vocabulary here, that links concepts to each other. So for example, here, you see that CAD software is relevant for draw blueprints, design control systems, design wearing apparel, etc. These are not hierarchical relationships. These are other types of relationships. Human beings do not think just in terms of hierarchy, brother or nar, or like what I was saying before. They say, okay, what is the function of this? CAD software is a tool. What is the function of this tool? And ontologies portray this. And in the same way that you describe the relationship between a tool, in this case a software, and the task for which it's useful, you can also do the same thing on the other way around. So drawing blueprints requires different tools for different things. And transforming ESCO into an ontology will give us the opportunity to say a lot more complex things about the labor market. So just imagine, if we could only use hierarchical relationships, we would be able to say only that fleet management system is narrower than digital tools or software tools. Whereas with an ontology, you can say that fleet management system is in fact related to all these other things, only it's a different type of relationship. I'm trying to go fast. We only have 5 minutes left, and my colleagues still have to say their bit. But this is what we would look in the portal. And then this would not just be for IT sector. This is something that we can apply for all industries. So, for example, psychiatry, this medical specialty is relevant. Psychiatric diagnosis of mental health, psychiatric diagnostics. So the idea is that all of a sudden you'll have access to a much wider network of connections between all the different skills and knowledges, how they relate to each other. That's it. That's the future of ESCO.
Future of ESCO. And now in my mind, I'm already combining this Oskuste compass, this skills compass, then this laser, also ESCO. And I imagine that in the future, if I need to write my CV, I just ask the ChatGPT, please look what is find about me online, look to these web pages in Estonia, in Sweden, in US, in the EU web page, and make a best CV for me. And then
That's already happening.
It's already...
Yeah.
It's quite common, especially in the US.
Yeah.
We had a open research position, and we got 50 to 100 applicants in under an hour for a position that was just posted fresh. They were almost all built by ChatGPT.
Okay, but if this is not future anymore, it's like present day, then what's the future? Better. So how do you see the future?
If I knew, I wouldn't be sitting here. Sorry, no. For future for taxonomies, well, I don't know, in Sweden, I don't know. I would wish that we kept praising maintenance and not only rewarded innovation. Okay, thank you.
Mike, so you totally crashed my
I'm sorry.
futuristic idea. So what do you can offer instead of it?
You know, the reality is, because ChatGPT exists, it's open access, and there's a lot of people who utilize it. I think the future is actually moving a bit backwards. Every technological leap almost is, without question, followed by a small step back. So we might have ChatGPT creating a lot of things, writing our academic papers, doing our resumes, that kind of thing. But the skills, as we heard this morning, that are really valuable in this market are the ones that ChatGPT doesn't actually do well. So it's the high-level editing, the compiling of the underlying concepts that you need to put together to make ChatGPT work properly. That skill set is what I think employers of the current and near future are going to really prioritize. So when we talk about the future of AI is what AI can't do, more so than what it can. We'll keep finding use cases for AI over time, but finding those gaps, the things it doesn't do well, is your market opportunity.
So, Ave, From your point of view, what's the future of Oskuste Kompass? Or let's make it even broader. How do you imagine the future of Kutsekoja?
In a way, I also did like a very general outline of the future, but basically I think that it's very important for us to concentrate not only quantitative but also qualitative aspects. So how we actually assess skills will be a very major topic in the next years. What should we actually do precisely to get the goal that we need so that we wouldn't just, do random things. We have to elevate quality, and it actually comes side to side with the quantity that, for example, generative AI offers. So we have to kind of like make it happen that whatever we can use, we use it well. And so in Kutsekoja or in Estonian Qualifications Authority, definitely the topics will be assessment, competence profiles, assistance to employers, assistance to educators, so that they can cope better with these very fast changes.
Okay. Thank you. To summarize this panel, I would say that we need systems. It doesn't matter what kind of systems they are. If they are working, then we should use them. These systems, they are like public good. So the responsibility of taking them into use is not yours. Your responsibility is to develop them. But to use these systems, it's your responsibility and those who are outside of this building. And most important thing, maybe the future is not very far away. Sometimes, like we demonstrated, the future is already here and it's happening. So let's make a big applause to our panelists. And now we have half an hour to go outside, to refresh ourselves, to have networking. And I welcome you back here at 3 o'clock. So see you after half an hour.